Welcome learners, it's week 2, lecture 7, and in this lecture we will focus on representation as a concept to understand gender and performance. In this particular lecture, we will talk about the concept of representation and gaze, and in the light of Manjula Padmanabhan's play Lights Out and Poili Sengupta's play Mangalam, we will analyze the plays and understand the idea of representation in detail. So this is the outline of the talk today, in which we will cover these areas. Now, what is representation? The word representation has a very old origin. When we go back to Aristotle, we find the word mimesis, a Greek term which means representation. The word representation originally comes from Aristotelian theory of mimesis, where the performer tends to imitate real life in the contemporary society of any given culture. What the people in a society or culture accept as physical reality gets imitated and presented as reality through art. So, art represents reality. Reality is recreated in art. Any art form, including theatre, recreates reality. It is a recreational act. Representation is a recreational act. And it's not only copy, which is a very limited word, but represent what we see, how things are. But the question is, does it imitate exactly as things are, or it imitates with cultural, political influences? This is the point that we will discuss further. So, representation is a depiction or a sign that stands for something else. A representation could be conveyed through various forms such as theatre, cinematic performance, literature, painting, or any other art can be included. But the question is there unmediated access to reality? Are the choices random or politically and ideologically neutral? Is there any unmediated access to reality? Can reality be accessed without any mediation? Can reality be accessed without political and cultural influences? Perhaps the answer is no. The recreation of reality, representation of reality is not politically and culturally neutral. It cannot be. It has subjective influences of the creator, writer or director, or the author who writes in a particular time and space the text. Hence, in representations, reality is presented from different positions. There are different positions. It could be central or marginal position from where reality is presented. The politics of its making and politics of interpretation. It's not only so that there is politics in representation only, or the political connotations are there in the representation. In fact, in the meaning making process or in the construction of meaning by the spectator, critique, reader or audience, there are political, cultural influences. It depends on the psyche of the spectator, the mindset of the spectator, how a particular thing is interpreted, a particular enactment is interpreted. It's not completely whole and sole responsibility of the actor or the writer or the text, but spectator also play a very important role to create or construct the meaning of the enactment. Ideally, as recreation, a representation must be filtered through the subjectivity of the artist who belongs to a specific culture. Art cannot stand apart from the conflicts and discourses of its time. So, with these points, it is clear that art cannot stand apart from its time and space that it belongs to. It cannot remain unaffected and neutral from the time and space and cultural references that come. The baggage which exists, art cannot exist without it. It has, in one or the other way, certain influences that construct the art in a certain way. Difference between reality and portrayal. Art attempts to represent reality which may not be taken as reality itself or be completely rejected as untrue. So if the reality is not exactly recreated in the representation in art, can we reject it as completely untrue? Can it be rejected completely? Of course not, because in some way it is a reflection of reality, but how it is done, whether it is consciously done or under certain pressure it is done, or with certain mindset and prejudices a particular art is constructed, that's a matter of discussion. But a work of art cannot be rejected as untrue completely. It can also cannot be taken as an exact representation of reality, but with every conscious choices that the writer or the director make in enactment, it gets closer to the reality. From the idealization, it moves away towards the closer aspect, deeper aspects of the reality. So art cannot be rejected merely on the ground that it is a representation of reality and not the reality itself. Hence, reality is constructed in art, including theatre. In theatre as well, reality is reconstructed and enacted. Representation is not politically and ideologically neutral, that we have just discussed. And in theatre, we see that it is like a magnifying glass or also like a reducing lenses. What does it mean when Peter Brook, a renowned scholar and theatre practitioner, stated that theatre is like a magnifying glass or reducing lenses? It means that it depends on the choice of the author, sometimes the choice of the director, how a particular aspect of reality is enacted. Sometimes it is underrepresented, reducing the lenses, underrepresenting a reality and it does not come out properly, or hyper representation of reality which may not in reality exist in the same form. So that's how theatre has the potential to present things in a certain way. It could be represented, it could be hyper presentation, or it could be under representation, and that is something which critics and scholars in gender studies and theatre studies, also in the studies of performance, critically analyze. So a writer may consciously choose to depart from the established and repeated stereotypes, or give a fresh meaning and better representation to a character which may modify attitudes and perceptions. The impact of representation in art cannot be denied. Enactment on stage engages the psyche of the audience watching the play. So it's up to the writer and director how they present a particular aspect of reality. They can keep on presenting the stereotypes. The stereotypes which are already existing can be presented in a different way, but the stereotypes are re-established only. But the author consciously may choose to present the reality in a different way, the alternative reality where it gets closer to the psyche of the character. If we talk about gender norms, closer to understand female experiences, male experiences, and the experiences of other gender with a deeper understanding and a humane perspective. Along with that, we also see that in this process of meaning making, the spectator also play a very important role, where he is watching a performance and constructing the meaning at the same time, trying to understand, trying to make sense of the play that he is watching. At the same time, what happens when consciously an enactment is done where a deeper understanding of gender is taken up, we see that it also creates a space in the mind of the audience where they are forced to think of the particular idea in a different way. Sometimes it helps to change their mindset about a stereotype or a prejudiced aspect. So we cannot say that theatre merely enacts and it has no capability to transform the society. Theatre brings change. Theatre has a potential to bring changes in the society, and in theatre it is stated that talking is also a kind of doing. So while creating a space for dialogue, an action is being done, an action to change the mindset, an action to create awareness, an action to bring transformation in the society and bring equality at the level of gender in the society. And that self-conscious staging of gender has been done from the late 20th century onwards by many of the initiative taken by the directors and actors who are excellent in their field. So I just talked about underrepresentation or hyper-representation of women, where we find A. Mangai, a very leading scholar and theatre practitioner, saying that devalue or overvalue of the female body has been shown on stage, which needs to be changed. We also see in this reference Nandi Bhatia saying that women are stereotypically presented as Maya, a temptress, or Mata in the role of mother, or a victim, a vulnerable figure. So they are presented typically in these three categories and classified in these three categories and not beyond that. We do not find fully developed human being, woman as a human being who is fully developed, who can think, who can take her own decision for a very long time on stage in theatre. Reinterpretation of the social bodies and re-evaluation of gender-based social identities to bring transformation and social change is an initiative taken by many of the writers in the late 20th century. Here in this context, we find A. Mangai saying that a body in motion is considered dangerous and bodily movements are governed by societal and cultural prescription. It could be, primarily we can talk about at this point, female body, moving in public spaces in certain hours after dark when they are not expected to be in the public sphere, and they moving would be a very dangerous situation, could be a risky situation. So we need to think of the societal norms at the same time and the body in movement, which becomes a greater threat when it happens in theatre. When an actress like Binodini Dasi entered on stage in Bengal, one of the first actresses in the history of Indian theatre, it was taken in a very strange way and her character was questioned. So a woman's body in motion, in action, was questionable. It was questioned, as A. Mangai says. The body on stage almost always represents something. So body is not standing in itself. It stands for something else. It suggests something else. It is symbolic. A body is symbolic. For example, when an impersonator impersonates something, symbolically, if he is a man impersonating a female character, then at that moment he is symbolically woman. And the gaze will be similar of the spectator towards him. Often there are cases of that where it is noticed. So it stands for something, it suggests something, it is a symbol of something which it enacts on stage for a particular period of time. Now we will talk about gaze and representation. Here a critique mentioned remarkably about the male gaze, saying that we don't know what woman's vision is. What do women's eyes see? How do they carve, invent, decipher the world? I don't know. I know my own vision, the vision of one woman, but the world seen through the eyes of others. I only know what men's eyes see. So it suggests towards the act of looking and gazing, which is gendered and political. Here, seeing is also not gender neutral. It has certain connotation. So this spectacle or looking at something also carries certain gender norms. How male look at something or how female look at something, and how one perceives the similar thing, the same reality, the same situation is interpreted and seen by two different categories of gender in two different ways, since they are socially conditioned and trained in a certain way to look at things in a particular manner, where one can enjoy seeing something, a troublesome situation, the other could be very much troubled to see the same thing. So it depends on what is the mindset and how social conditioning of that person has been done as per the gender norms of the society, which we are analyzing and questioning. Moving towards the analysis part here, we see in Manjula Padmanabhan's well-known play Lights Out, where she stated that in real life, as in the play, a group of ordinary middle-class people chose to stand and watch while a woman was being brutalized in a neighboring compound. In this play, which is based on a real life situation that happened in the city of Bombay, about which Manjula Padmanabhan came to know, and she was so moved that she wrote a play on it. This play is set in an urban middle class scenario where it's an apartment where a family lives, husband, wife and a child, and in the next building where apartments are under construction and the building is not completely constructed and people are not living there, a woman is victimized, and every night voice is coming of screaming, crying for help, and people in the residential apartment are aware of it. The family keeps on talking about it, but no one goes there, questions it, rescues her and complains about it in police. So here the idea of looking at something has been problematized, where we find Mohan, who is the breadwinner of the family, a male figure, father, watching it, at the same time asking his wife, saying that you can close down your ear and we can shut down the windows and do not pay attention to it, whatever is going on. It's not happening here in our apartment, it's happening in another apartment. What do we have to do? Let us keep a distance with it, but at the same time taking pleasure out of it. So the idea of seeing something and believing that you are not part of it has been questioned by Manjula Padmanabhan in this play Lights Out. We see Mohan while watching the crime taking place, a woman being victimized, and he said, we are just far enough not to get involved, and we are just close enough to see everything clearly. How diplomatic statement he made here, where he is saying that we are not involved, we are not participating, but at the same time when you are watching something, you are very much part of it, because you chose to be silent and not to raise question and go against the crime which is taking place in front of your eye. So here these characters and the spectators who are actually watching the play Lights Out, both becomes viewers, and the spectacle what they are viewing is something which is happening outside the window in the next apartment, which is visible to these characters like Mohan and Leela, but not to everyone. It is suggested, and the voices are coming, voice of scream and crying for help, which is very moving, and in itself it is suggesting what is the matter. Leela stated that why do they have to do it here? Why can't they go somewhere else? Can they go somewhere else and do the same thing? it suggested that Leela, being a woman, is not disturbed that why the crime of rape at all is happening. She is disturbed because it is happening next to her apartment and not because it is happening in itself. So the voice, the scream is disturbing her. That's why she wants them to go somewhere else but not here. Again, this detachment, this understanding of not being part of it and getting victimized are questioned by Padmanabhan in this play Lights Out. Then again, the threat of rape was questioned by one of the feminist writer, Brown Miller, where she is saying that every woman is not victim of it, but every woman carries the threat of it, which is questioned here. And the spaces of fear and the spaces of comfort, space of care and the space of fear and threat are segregated and explained how it creates different kind of emotions and sense of belonging and non-belongingness in the heart of a woman. Moving towards the next play that we shall be discussing to understand the idea of representation here, it's the play by Pauli Sengupta, a well-known playwright who writes in English, an Indian playwright. Her plays strongly carries Indian ethos and sensibility, and in this play Mangalam, which is a play which was awarded, and here we have a play within the play technique used. When the play opens, we see there is a setting of a middle class conventional room where the characters are there, male figure, female figure are existing there talking to each other, that is revealing what is the situation, and it talks about the character Mangalam. When the play opens, she is no more alive, but she was the victim of child abuse and domestic violence, and it is unrevealed through the characters who talk about her and the situations are revealed. So we get to understand how women typically face the challenges in a domestic space. It also points out how family is the primary site of patriarchy. In this play, the first act is revealed later that it was a play within the play which a modern family went to watch, and then they are discussing about how it used to happen, but the things are changed, which it is not. They find themselves in a similar kind of situation, not believing in it, that nothing much has changed and women are still facing those kinds of issues that they used to face a generation back. So here we see in Mangalam that the title character is a victim of child sexual abuse and domestic violence, and she is no more when the play opens. Here Dorai is the leading figure, a patriarch who believes that things are different for men and women, and that is how he runs the family and applies certain conventions and imposes certain norms within the family. When his daughter Usha, who was a victim of domestic violence and abuse, left her husband's house and came back saying, "I have come back, Appa," he was shocked and he was shattered because he did not expect this to happen. Once upon a time, in a situation, he was the one who himself was involved into it, and Mangalam was a victim of domestic violence. But when he found after a generation his own daughter being victimized, he was shattered. He was speechless. And it was realized that ultimately he is looking for peace in life. These norms are not only tormenting and pressurizing for women but also for men. They are unable to give an outlet to their emotions when they face it. So the patriarchal structure not only victimizes women but men as well. And here Dorai, towards the second half, when we see his daughter coming back and another child taking his own decision and not making him part of it, he realized that he also has done certain mistakes in his life. So Dorai in Mangalam exercised his masculine dominant position but ended with dissatisfaction and search for peace. Mangalam portrays men of two generations. The first generation is represented as a rigid, conservative, staunch custodian of patriarchal norms, whereas the second generation of men like Vikram and Suresh in the play are represented as participating in the dialogue. At least they create a space where people are having their own voice and they are allowed to speak and they listen to each other. So a dialogic space is created in the next generation in which we find Vikram and Suresh are part of it. So this was a play Mangalam, and we also talked about Lights Out. To understand the concept of representation, how not only women or men but other gender identities are represented, some other plays are recommended to read. For example, Safdar's Hashmi street play, a well-known street play Aurat, dealt with the pertinent issues of bride burning, dowry and wife bettering. And this was performed multiple times on the street in the middle of the masses in the colloquial language. A renowned writer Bhishma Shani wrote play Madhavi that gives voice to the character of Madhavi, who was voiceless in Mahabharata. Here, Mahashweta Devi's plays are also important to understand how gender representation takes place, and Amal Alana's directed play Nati Binodini suggests us the representation of gender ambiguity and very nature of fluidity of gender. Some more examples are there like Gitanjali Shree's Umrao, Tripurari Sharma's Bahu and Lado Masi. These are remarkable plays to understand the concept of representation in Indian drama and stage. So with these words, we will move to another lecture, and I hope that the concept of representation is clear. Thank you so much.